Welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast, where we deep dive into the best matches in AEW history. Brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network and your host, Sam Brown. Yes, hello and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thank you for joining me. Every week, alongside a special guest, I take an in-depth look at one of the best matches in AEW history, taken from the definitive AEW Match Guide, as ranked by over 30 wrestling commentators from around the internet wrestling community. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe and rate it on your podcast app of choice, and make sure you check out all of the other great shows we have on the Social Suplex Podcast Network that cover all aspects of the world of professional wrestling. My guests for today are the creators of the This Is Awesome and the All About All Elite podcasts, Frank, Charlie, and Joaquin. And we'll be looking at Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley at Revolution 2021, the AEW Heavyweight Championship exploding barbed wire death match. How are you going today, gentlemen?
You kind of sent me a little bit. You said 2021, and I had to remember. I was like, there's no way this match was from this year.
Yeah, I don't remember this happening this year, but I did rewatch it today, and I have confirmed that it is in fact this year.
I'll take your word for it. I don't know. That's crazy.
Yeah, maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but it is jarring to go back to Daly's place.
Yeah, I don't want to go back.
It was strange and going without, because doing this project, you guys are about the 10th episode or so that we'll be doing, and going back and seeing this partial crowd's atmosphere, it's really jarring and very strange to sort of go back and relive. Just so the guys know who each voice is, if I could just get each of you to briefly say who you are.
Sure.
I'll go first.
I'll go ahead, Frank. Yeah, go do it.
Yeah, I'll fucking do it. Hi, I'm Frank Gibson. I am one part of the This Is Awesome podcast crew.
I'm Joaquin Poblete. I am the second of the This Is Awesome podcast crew. I am based out of Los Angeles, and I work in the industry, but nobody cares about that. I like wrestling and talking about wrestling, and for some reason, sometimes people do that on the internet. So thanks to everybody who does that.
That's true. I'm your last co-host for This Is Awesome pod, Charlie and Tosca. They call me Chuck. I am also based out of Los Angeles. I am a writer like Frank. It's a very diverse group here we've got. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this match, man. I rewatched this, and it's like I had thoughts and feelings. I'm excited.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in this one, of varying degrees of good and bad. And there's a part. Okay, I'm gonna set up a reveal for later in the episode.
Okay.
There's a part of this match that is the worst part of this match, and it isn't the explosion at the end.
Oh, hot take.
Interesting.
I love it.
I'm keen to find out what part that is. Before we do get into the match, I do want to thank you guys for jumping on here, and also give you a special thanks because I've essentially lifted the idea for this podcast from your podcast, This Is Awesome, which if people haven't heard,
all right,
you should definitely
Derivative
check
works.
Yeah, absolutely. Inspired by.
That's awesome. That's great. I'm glad you've been doing it while we've been off too. So.
Well, hopefully I can kickstart you guys back on the track for that. But also, for those of you who don't know these three, they are actually the creators of the first ever AEW podcast, as certified by the Young Bucks as well.
That's right.
That
tweet's only a screenshot now, unfortunately, because they deleted all their tweets.
Yeah, watching the Elite. We are the OG AEW podcast.
Yeah, I was
granddaddy of them all.
Can you tell the good people how you guys did get into AEW and how you created the first ever AEW podcast?
It's Joaquin's fault. You should probably do it. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Oh, okay. So we're as we said, we're all based out of Los Angeles, and this podcast, our original podcast, really just came from being a group of friends that was super into pro wrestling, but specifically because we all lived in the same apartment complex and realized that this would be a fun thing to do on, Mondays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, Tuesdays as well. But we all kind of rekindled our love of wrestling around the same time. I think it was Summer of Punk, the Yes Movement, all that stuff. And during that time, it just so happened to be that just loaded PWG 2013 to 2016 roster, which is basically making up the main event scene of every reputable promotion now. And it was just a thing we did as a crew. We loved going to those shows, and we loved booing and cheering for the Young Bucks very, very specifically. And
Fuck the Young Bucks was the chorus of Reseda, California at the time when PWG wasn't in a nice theater. When you could still buy tickets at the door for the for the first few PWG shows that we went to together. Like, Chuck, you've been around for a while longer, so you'd seen the Bucks at like fairgrounds and stuff like that. Like in Pomona.
Yeah. Like Anaheim Marketplace, the flea market, like that whole like kind of SoCal crew has been wrestling in and around like much jankier places since like 2003.
Yeah.
I've got like a vague sense memory of like 120-pound Scorpio Sky jumping off a ladder in the back of a flea market in like 2004. So.
Yeah. Whereas I saw like Frankie Kazarian like wrestle for like the first time at like WWA World Wrestling All-Stars, which was like a Australian promotion that turned out to be a front for a cocaine smuggler. Yeah, like they brought down Frankie Kazarian to New Zealand. So, and like
Amazing.
Sting was there too. He didn't wrestle. He was just like there. Yeah, like so like I think we all collectively felt a connection with like a lot of these guys from just seeing like the early stages of their careers. And then
obviously they started, they were going to do All In. And so as a build up to All In, we thought it would be a really good idea to essentially binge the entirety of Being the Elite. And so that was the impetus of the Watching the Elite podcast. It started off as binging BTE to get people ready for All In. And then we just kind of kept doing it. And it turns out that like we became
Joaquin
the first AEW
curse.
podcast backwards. Yeah. So.
It gave the curse to fucking Chuck and I to keep it going once it went live.
Well, that was the funniest thing about it too, is like I do very specifically remember saying like this will be a fun thing. We'll get really excited about going All In, because it was this trip we had planned. It was actually my birthday. All In was my birthday a couple of years ago. It was like one of the best birthdays I've ever had, and we didn't see it going where it went, which is silly because I don't know. It's like Bill Gates foreseeing the pandemic. Daniel Bryan foresaw AEW. We've all seen that clip. We were too dumb to see that coming. So of course we started this podcast, and I just very specifically remember the Being the Elite where they revealed AEW existing. It was like New Year's. I was at a New Year's party and I literally went into a closet to watch that. And I remember thinking, damn it, now we're going to have to cover so much more content.
Every week. There's like a point where you had us watching Shot of Brandy like every week.
Yeah.
Well, there are now literally thousands of AEW podcasts, of which this is one, but there can only be one first, and I'm happy to declare you guys the first. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you.
You know what? We'll get the tweet because we were tweeted out by I think it was Matt tweeted it from the official account, which was very funny because me and Chuck were joking around about we were like, did they listen to the show? Because we make certain jokes we don't know that they would agree with, but they tweeted us out. But it's been since deleted in the great purge of their Twitter account. But I have a screenshot, so it's verifiable.
Look, I was there. I'll verify it for you. That was something that happened. Getting into the match, because we do pick one match every week and dig into it. And we are picking Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega. I do have a question. Why did you guys choose this match? This isn't a match that is let's just say this was a controversial match at the time, and I'm curious why you guys chose to pick this one given the list of options that was in front of you.
I'll speak for myself. I found it the most interesting because of the sort of controversial ending, right? There are a lot of people in the WrestleGencia that essentially write off this entire match simply because of what happens in the final moments, which isn't even the actual match, by the way. It's like 5 minutes after the match ends. And I think it does a disservice to what is a really inventive and interesting twist on the death match. It's a gimmick that we hadn't seen in North America to date. There's a lot of really inventive stuff in here. It's maybe a little too violent for many people's taste, but there's a time and a place for it, and it works here. And I think it's important to keep talking about it so people don't just write it off because of the fart at the end of the match.
Yeah.
Also, it's like a pandemic era match, and I understand that you're probably covering like a lot of pandemic era stuff like throughout your show, but this is like they let a smattering of people in for this one. Like there's like a few hundred people, I believe, in the crowd for Revolution, but like all the pandemic stuff, I feel like it isn't going to be remembered. Like everyone's just gonna feel like it was like filler that succeeded in spite of its circumstances. And like I think this is a great match. I don't want people to forget it, except for the one thing that I said earlier, but we'll get to it.
Okay, well, we'll get to that eventually at some point, I'm sure. It's interesting to relitigate some of these matches. Like a few weeks ago, with one of my friends, The Implication, I did Blood and Guts, and that of course had a similar sort of thing to this match. So looking forward to getting into it. Now, as we always do here, we give the match its flowers. Big Papa Dave, he rated this 4.5 of the big ones. At Cage Match, they've currently got it rated at 7.62. And in the definitive match guide that was put together just after Double or Nothing 2021, so not so far after this match, it came in 15th on the list of 50. Of course, this is a match that was built from the very start of AEW, and for me at least, it felt like these two within the first 18 months of the promotion were the two biggest names, and this was the biggest rivalry the company had ever had. Moxley, of course, he debuted at Double or Nothing, just attacking everyone after the final match had finished, and the show went off the air with Omega and Moxley brawling, and of course Moxley standing tall on that stack of chips. Now, I've heard stories about like that entire building shaking when Moxley came down. You guys were actually there, so I want to know what that specific moment in time was like.
That was fucking crazy. Like I've been to a few WrestleManias. There was like the WrestleMania, I think it was in Dallas, where like it's Roman and Triple H was the main event, I think.
Yeah,
something like that.
Which time? Oh wait, sorry.
and you expect, because Gallows and Anderson have reportedly signed, and you're just like, oh shit, they're gonna come in with a bang. They're gonna debut like fucking Balor Club or something like that, and they're gonna come in, they're gonna beat up Roman or something like that. And then like nothing happens because it's WWE. Not to be too partisan, it's just like, you fantasy book this thing, and Double or Nothing, you couldn't fantasy book any better. You want it to happen. You want something that big to happen, and then when it does, there is such a release from that crowd, because there's almost like a can they stick the landing? Because like the air had been taken out of the sails like a little bit, I think, with like the Jericho victory.
Yep.
And then they made good on it. And man, like I just remember the crowd did not stop. Like I think it comes across so much louder than it did on TV. What do you guys remember?
I remember it was like being in the inside of a Monster Energy can. Is maybe like it. That's what it felt like. And the thing is, for me, I mean, especially when I'm at a live event, this is something we talk about on our show, is how fun of a time I usually have at live events. But I'm there to mark out. I'm there to forget everything. I read the sheets as much as everybody. I'm on Squared Circle as much as everybody. I try to forget that when I'm there. And I think that collectively, everybody had managed to do that. It's like almost like the main event was very good, and we almost forgot there was this one thing left to do. And when that happened, it felt like being, a preteen again is what it felt like for me, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. On TV, I just love the way it has a slow build where you can, people in the crowd are noticing, and you're like, there's a commotion while Jericho's cutting this promo, and then he must have got on screen or something, and the whole crowd just absolutely erupts. What a way to debut someone, and what a way to set up these two as well, as two of the preeminent figures in AEW, and a rivalry that is going to become a real centerpiece for the company. Of course, these two after that were scheduled to face each other at All Out, but Jon Moxley had to pull out due to a staph infection and injury. But they picked up the feud again on the very first Dynamite, where Moxley put Omega through a glass table, setting up what was going to be a very violent feud. And they went on to have an unsanctioned match at Full Gear, which Moxley, of course, won. The win setting himself up for his championship shot. Omega went on to be part of the tag team scene with his partnership with Hangman Page, but once that dissolved and Omega won the Championship Contenders Tournament at Full Gear 2020, 2020. That set up the match with Jon Moxley, which happened at Winter is Coming. Omega won that with the assistance of Don Callis setting up their partnership, and with Omega finally picking up the AEW Championship that he had been deprived of for the first year or so of the company's existence. How did you guys feel about the positioning of these two characters and sort of the way their rivalry was set up to when Winter is Coming happened and that title change happened?
I think that it was needed for Kenny Omega. I think people were pushing for something that they weren't going to get. Like, everyone was clamoring, when are we going to get the cleaner? When are we going to get New Japan Kenny Omega? And if there's anything that we know about AEW and the way that they work, is that they want to do something new and different. They're not going to go backwards. And so I loved the heel turn for Kenny Omega, stealing the title with the help of Don Callis, and it was just a great refresh.
I thought you won fair and square. That's what Don said on commentary. He won fair and square.
And then obviously it keeps Moxley super strong. It gets him back to where he's at his best, which is chasing for the title again. And it was also it acts as kind of a nice cool down for what was an awesome run for Moxley through the sort of lean pandemic months, which I think he did a great job as champion.
Yeah, I think the alignment switch was pretty cool, where it's like, Kenny Omega was going to be your top babyface in AEW, and he gets his ass beat by Chris Jericho. And then he gets thrown off a stack of poker chips by a debuting quote-unquote babyface Jon Moxley.
Nice.
And he doesn't make that main event. He gets stuck in the tag team with like Hangman Adam Page, where he wants to be going for the top title. It's kind of like an albatross to him. And then eventually, he gets asked to be the cleaner enough that he has dancing girls come out with brooms. And he joins Don Callis, and I think the build to this match is fantastic. Like, the fact that they did that title change on TV as well during Winter is Coming, I think was great. And yeah, I mean, this is like the exact type of match that a Jon Moxley would theoretically want. But as we see the match unfold, maybe that isn't what he wants.
Well, it also works so well into sort of the insecurities of the Omega character, the heel Omega character, that actually would kind of like mirror or be the inverse of how Hangman dealt with his failures. Kenny essentially is like, maybe I'm not good enough, and instead of running away, just blatantly starts to cheat. And it makes logical sense that, this would lead to a match like this exploding barbed wire match. Like, it is this big extravagant gimmick, but ultimately what it also is it's a way for Kenny to have an infinite number of good brothers run down to the ring and help him win. So it's like it all like makes sense, like, logically within these characters.
Yeah, and particularly as an escalation of what they'd previously done. Of course, they had that very violent match at Full Gear, and then followed it up with Winter is Coming, which, while it was a standard match, was certainly one where they laid things in very heavily. I believe it had, it's been a while since I've watched it, but I know that it had stuff happening on the outside. I think there was chairs involved. And the positioning of it was that these two were the most titanic figures in the company at the time, and they had a rivalry that just could not be resolved any other way. And that was shown through January, February, after that Winter is Coming match, where Moxley would chase Omega, often turning up completely outnumbered, but still launching himself into the entire Super Elite. I know there was sort of teasers of if the Young Bucks are going to go along with Omega down this path, and they ended up going after Moxley just as hard as Omega and the Good Brothers. And eventually it was actually Omega that announced that at Revolution, the pair would have an exploding barbed wire death match because Omega wanted to get rid of Moxley once and for all. You already had the stakes of this being the two biggest names in the company, but doing something that was almost completely taboo and something that had never happened before. It almost felt like a violation of what wrestling should be in America. How did you guys feel when this match was announced?
To be perfectly honest with you, my first reaction was, we're going to get a very sanitized version of this gimmick. Like, that's just my knee jerk, just because how could you possibly do what they were, but then I thought about it, I was like, well, no, that's the AEW is like, they're actually going to deliver on their promises. At least that's like, what you've come to expect from the company. So I was thrilled. I was a little nervous, but I was just kind of gobsmacked. Like, I can't believe this is actually happening in a mainstream wrestling company, that's on pay-per-view in America. It it was shocking but exciting. I think you nailed it with Sam when you're saying it was kind of like taboo, in the best way possible.
Yeah. I felt the same way about it. However, I was we didn't have the hindsight of it. It's just like, oh yeah, and AEW is gonna bring in Nick Gage and he's gonna light tube Chris Jericho on TNT.
Right.
Like this was part of like AEW's violence escalation. I was a little worried because I'm just like, wow, AEW is doing a lot of blood and a lot of dangerous gimmicks, and I was like starting to get a little worried about how far they were going to push things. Because, I understand that Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega, it's one of the reasons why I was excited about this match, is it's just like, if you see an exploding barbed wire death match outside of, ones that involve like a Terry Funk or a Mick Foley, and it's arguable whether the Mick Foley one's even a good match. It has a very similar finish to this one.
Yeah.
But it's like, you don't get to see wrestlers of this caliber in America having these kinds of matches. If you see a wrestler having a match like this, you're probably going to see it in CZW or something like that. It's probably not going to be a particularly good match, but it'll be like spectacle. In Japan, it's a little different. Though, if you watch like the FMWE promotion that Onita has, the matches are fucking terrible. Like, they're all awful. Like, Onita's like 62 and he's just wrestling some big fat guy, and then they just like roll around for a while and everyone just blades and then it explodes. So I was like excited to see it. I'm just like, what does a Kenny Omega do on a match like this? And the answer is just have a great match within the confines of three sides of barbed wire.
and I think that is what Dave, Big Papa Dave, big ups to him, of course. I think that's what he likes most about this in his 4.5 star review. That's what he talks about, right? These are the greatest wrestlers that have ever performed in a barbed wire match as far as like actual technical skill. As Frank pointed out in his withering indictment of Nick Mondo's work rate a few minutes ago, unfortunately.
It's more Matt Tremont, even though I like Matt Tremont.
Sure.
He's no Kenny Omega, is all I'm saying.
That's right. Well, in sort of in the same vein, but what I was very excited about, and I was really excited when I heard about this, is since then we've learned that like Kenny, this was one of the things in the first few years of AEW that he really wanted to do, and he sort of earmarked Mox as his handpicked opponent for this, and it just goes to show you, and we're seeing this now with Punk, with Bryan Danielson. We talk so much nowadays about like, oh my God, isn't it so great to see CM Punk happy to be back in a wrestling ring? Isn't it so exciting to see Bryan Danielson with a smile on his face, like a sincere smile that he's sort of keeping back as he wrestles. And the thing is, we take for granted, this was the same for Kenny. This was the same for Jon Moxley back then. This was the draw of AEW as a place to be. The fact that these artists were going to be able to be handed the paintbrushes that the palette that they'd been wanting to paint with for a while. And even if it was going to be this sort of weird, out there, taboo, violent thing, to back Frank's point, I think that the first maybe year or so of AEW was sort of AEW teaching non-hardcore smart fans how to watch AEW moving forward. And I think this match, for all the flack that it gets, is a part of that legacy and is a foundational building block towards us enjoying AEW now and saying that Double or Nothing 2021 is like one of the best pay-per-views of all time, that, this past pay-per-view Full Gear is such an amazing pay-per-view. It's off the backs of matches like this.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, Omega and Moxley, you've got two guys who are willing to put their bodies absolutely on the line in ways that, or every wrestler is willing to put their body on the line for their art, but there are some that do it even more so and are willing to like literally put their lives on the line. And that's how it felt like going into this match. I feel like when getting into the match and when this thing started, I remember sitting in my room wondering if I was about to see someone like permanently injured, permanently scarred, or, what is the absolute worst that could possibly happen in a wrestling ring. And I think that's part of the anticipation that comes with this sort of match. It's just the inherent danger of it. And in Moxley and Omega, it's even scary because you know that these are two guys who will lay absolutely everything on the line. And that was emphasized in the sort of the video package that they kicked this off with. It had the history of their rivalry, also sort of contrasted with the history of this type of match, particularly in Japan, showing the sorts of explosions, showing the sort of damage that can be done. And in another great wink to it, Moxley came out with a jacket that was reminiscent of the one that Onita wears, sort of the king of this match style, and almost looking a little bit more nervous than normal. Normally he absolutely rips and tears on his way to the ring, but he was a little bit more subdued than normal. And of course, taking a bit of a sip of whiskey from a flask before he got into it. You've got Bryce Rensburg wearing a fireproof suit and a face shield in the ring. There's exploding barbed wire boards surrounding the ring. There's barbed wire on 3 sides. Apparently the fire marshal made them have a way out. That was at least the kayfabe reason that was given.
That concept. Yeah, I love that concept because they could justify it however they want.
Yeah.
That one set of ropes makes this match better than basically every barbed wire match I've seen before. Yeah. Just then being able to use the ropes at all, even if it's just one side, just elevates the match so much. So they could say it's a fire marshal or Doc Samson, or just them being like, man, you know what? It's kind of stupid to put barbed wire all around the ring when there's guys in it. Like, whatever the reason, it worked out great.
Yeah. And I think it didn't make it feel any less unsafe. And Don Callis perfectly summed things up. He gets on the call, gets on the microphone. The first thing he says is, "Gentlemen, it's a great day to die." And there's just this
he is
sense of
magnificently shitty. I love him. Yeah. Oh my God.
Don Callis is great.
Frank, you already said some stuff around it, but Joaquin and Chuck, what did you guys think of the setup they had going on here?
I mean, we talk about it on our show all the time how important atmosphere is, and it's all like the non-wrestling, it's all the intangibles, right? And rewatching this, I was just reminded of how much the atmosphere really adds to the tension here, and the way that AEW figured out how to shoot their shows in the pandemic. You never really notice that there isn't a crowd. There aren't these the way they shoot it. It kind of obscures the fact that they're kind of wrestling for no one, which really helps us feel like it has the high stakes that it needs. But for me, the standout part of the atmosphere, the thing that I notice immediately that I can't not look at, he's the only person who could have refereed this match. Bryce Remsburg is a champion. And it's not just the outfit, it's the way that he reacts. He really is AEW's Red Shoes. He goes big. Those explosions don't get sold the way that they need to unless Remsburg also falls over the way that he does. And I just want to just give an extra shout out to him adding to the tension in the match. Brilliant, especially at the beginning. That shot of him holding up the belt in the full hazmat suit, I think is perhaps the most iconic image of the match.
Yeah, I think that's great. Also, Bryce, even between the big spots, walks around the ring like he stubbed his toe the entire time. He's always just oh, fuck, oh, please, every single, even if there's nothing happening, he's always oh, like he's selling what happened before and what will happen later, even if there's nothing happening in the ring. It's great. I love Bryce.
Bryce is one of the best referees at playing sort of that Greek chorus, and not every referee does that. And as an added plus, he got to use that for his Jesse Pinkman costume the same Halloween. So big ups for him for that.
Hey, all right. Man.
There you go. With the actual match, once they did get going, immediately you get an idea of the tension, and you can feel the added escalation in that tension that you get from having barbed wire and explosives all around the ring. With the first lockup is just so full of drama and intensity as these two are trying to scratch and push each other and avoid themselves. There's some really great teasers in this bit, isn't there?
Oh yeah, it's paced like a thriller at the start.
Yeah,
it's not like a, you could say a CZW deathmatch main events kind of Saw, it's like a horror porn kind of thing where it's just what's the most awful thing we can do, and then you just do that 10 times and then the match is over.
It's gratuitous for the sake of itself.
Yeah. But this, it's just the build up, and that's what makes that it perfectly sets the stage for the rest of the match. You'd think that neither of these people want to go into the exploding barbed wire. And the fact that you have to set up that conceit in wrestling is ridiculous, but you do. Because the way some other people do it, they just throw themselves into that shit. Not these boys. They don't want to be in there.
Right. Yeah, they really maximize the drama. You're right. It is in the withholding that you raise the stakes, and they do a very good job of really teasing it out. And then once you get to the actual violence, they then do the proper escalation. I think one of my favorite like swings in the match. We have that first explosion. You know, it's Mox that goes into the barbed wire and it pops the first time. Great. The second explosion, it's not just the one, it's bang bang. You know what I mean? Like now we've stepped it up again. Like these guys are just masters in the way that they control how this whole thing kind of crescendos to the end.
Yeah, even just in the very first bit, first they do a lockup and they're struggling. Yeah. Then they do some Irish whips and they sort of steady themselves and pull out. Then the next one, Kenny steadies himself against the barbed wire board in the corner. He puts his foot on it to steady himself. Then they sort of go to the outside and they're fighting on the outside with the trash bin, with barbed wire bats, and getting to work that way. And as you said, Omega is the first one to throw Moxley into the barbed wire. Mox gets some powder in the face and then gets thrown into the barbed wire. Joaquin, what did you think of the first explosion when it went off?
I love that it was Kenny that threw Mox in, because every time they use those explosives in this match, it's for a different storytelling beat. And the idea that this was Kenny's, this was Kenny's concept. I remember very specifically when they released the diagram on, I think it was like social media or Twitter or something like that. It's very like Home Alone diagram that Kenny came up with. It's very appropriate that Kenny is the one that is able to do it, and it's very appropriate that he did it with a bit of sand to the face, a little powder to the face. All these beats are very character driven. Even the second explosion, which we're not to yet, it's a different beat, and it's just and I always say this about AEW, it's an intelligently laid out match from a psychological storytelling perspective.
Absolutely. Chuck and Frank, what did you guys think of just in general of the pyro that they used as it went off?
I think it's visually effective, right? Like if you turn the sound off in this match and just kind of watch it with some distance and don't let yourself get invested in it, you can tell how much heavy lifting the guys are doing, by like throwing their bodies off the barbed wire. Like they're insinuating, right, that like there's an explosion or maybe some kind of electricity or something that is adding to the sort of the concussive elements of the ropes going off. But really, it's just like it's kind of a spark, some powder, and the guys go flying, right? So it's effective in accomplishing what it's trying to do.
The sound, I think the sound was really important. I legitimately forgot that the explosions off the ropes were good. Like like in my head, I'm just like, oh, all the explosions are a bit lackluster in this match, and that's not the case. Like they go off, they make a big noise, crowds chanting, "Holy shit, this is awesome!" Like it's working. And as Chuck said, the guys in the ring are selling it, and that's what makes it work. Because if they just popped off like nothing happened, then people will be like, "Those explosions sucked." But I really did forget that the explosions were good.
An interesting thing for me is comparing something like this to what your expectation in, say, a movie is, where, I mean, you guys know better than me. You live in LA. You're actually in sort of the industry that employs these sorts of things. Is instead of having real explosives, they'll load things up with petrol and gasoline, which you wouldn't use if you're actually trying to blow something up, but looks spectacular on screen. Whereas these guys can't exactly do that because they have to, he's standing next to it when it goes off. But it's still, it has a feeling of force. And of course, that's sold by the fact that as soon as Moxley goes into it and he's the first one to take it, Omega can immediately take advantage. He hits a Kotaro Crusher onto the trash can that's in the ring, and Mox comes up with some blood on his face. I'm not sure if it was a blade job or not. If it was a blade job, he did it very, very quickly. And Omega sort of keeps trying to press that advantage, gets him into a figure four, and then Moxley, in like something that just feels so gruesome, gets a barbed wire wrap chair and just grates it against Omega's leg. Omega relies so much on his explosiveness and athleticism that comes off, his explosive base, which Mox is working against by sort of grating against him there. It's a pretty brutal little spot.
Yeah,
I love that spot.
It's nasty.
I love that spot partially because I think it's very indicative of who Jon Moxley is in AEW. We were talking about that moment where he debuted initially at Double or Nothing, and It's funny, and I kind of, I want to turn this around to you because you're asking us questions. I want to ask you a question because you are a huge Moxley fan. He's one of your faves, and the thing is, I love that AEW Jon Moxley is different than Indies Jon Moxley is different than Dean Ambrose. Like, this Jon Moxley is John McClane, and you can see that in this match a lot, and you can see it in the way that in that moment, that's all he has available to him. It's like a violent version of catch as catch can. He's very resourceful, and the Jon Moxley of AEW is, if anything, a resourceful survivor. How do you feel like the Jon Moxley character differs in AEW versus Dean Ambrose versus indie Jon Moxley? Like, is there something in that evolution that like draws you further to him as a fan, Sam?
I've definitely appreciated him more. I was a huge Dean Ambrose fan back in WWE. Him and Seth Rollins and their feud is very much the thing that drew me back into wrestling as like a hardcore fan. I came back around WrestleMania 30 for the Yes Movement, but it was their rivalry that really ignited my passion and made me want to dig in deeply. So I've got a lot of affection for the Dean Ambrose character, and he certainly had a lot of ups and downs in the WWE in terms of his presentation. And it was inconsistent, but part of that is just because WWE creative is inconsistent. But when I look back at, say, the Dean Ambrose in late 2015, early 2016, the guy who nearly won the Royal Rumble, who wrestled Triple H to a standstill and nearly won the championship, who faced down Brock Lesnar and was one of the first guys to really put fear into Brock Lesnar at that point, and then, of course, won the championship off and beat the other Shield members. I sort of see Jon Moxley in AEW as an extension of that character. He's definitely taken it further. He's definitely more intense. Of course, the violence that he can perpetrate is much higher and much larger. But in terms of who he is at his core, I feel like that core is still there in terms of like the character's values, in terms of what he values in other people, what he values in wrestling, and how he's like a blue collar worker almost. And he's got like a lot of pride in how he goes about his craft. And, like, this is the guy who had, as kooky of a match as it was, had the Ambrose Asylum. And Chris Jericho, right. Thumbtacks, talk about using whatever comes to mind and whatever you can get your hands on. That whole match was about that. Obviously not anywhere near as well done as this match or anything that he has done in AEW, but it's that sort of spirit, I think, that's continued on. And I think there's a lot of Dean Ambrose in Jon Moxley, not to say it hasn't extended. And I do sometimes get a little bit shitty at some of the takes about his WWE run because of the success of his AEW run. Because I've still got a lot of love for that. And, as we said, like, this is him at his core, just grabbing what he can to try and grift his way back into this match.
I love it. Just by the way, I love and miss Mitch the Plant, so I'm there with you.
Yeah. But like, even that, like the Mitch thing, we laugh about it, but the reason that he destroyed Chris Jericho's jacket is because to him, he just wanted to find what was most valuable to Chris Jericho, because to him, what was most valuable was Mitch the Plant. He didn't care that it was like $3 versus $15,000, because this is not a guy that cares about material items in that way. It's what it mattered to him. And so he destroyed what mattered most to Chris Jericho, because Chris Jericho destroyed what mattered most to him. That is a wild
WWE Moxley. WWE Moxley is like he made it work. Like when they first like put up
100%.
Like they he made it work, and that's like, I think that's the only, again, I'm very partisan in this, the only way that you can succeed in WWE is if you can make whatever weird shit gets handed to you work. Yeah, and some people have a unique ability to be able to do that. Like they hand you anything and you're just like, oh, I can deliver this somehow. And it's such a huge thing to overcome, and he could always do it until the end, where they gave him the gas mask and all that stuff. He's a unique, once-in-a-generation talent, and there was even some stuff so bad he couldn't make it work.
But he always had that thing that came through, right? Like, even with some of the bad material, like, you could always tell that, like, he had an X factor. I think it's why it was so frustrating being a fan of Dean Ambrose near the end was because you knew that he back in 2016 when he had that title run and he was wrestling more than any other guy in the company on both shows, traveling around, really elevating that title. And then when it kind of all went away and he was kind of shifted back down the card a little bit, it was very frustrating because you were just like, no, he should be the guy. I know you want it to be the other guy, but it should be this guy. And just now we've gone on this kind of like.
Well, and I think I can
derailing your show the way that we derail
our shows. Yeah, but
hey, look, I'm always happy to spend 5 minutes talking about Jon Moxley.
That's right. Well, and I want to give you kudos and get us back on track at the same time because I think that I really respect that. I think you've pointed out something very key. And this dovetails with what Frank was saying about what it takes to succeed in the WWE despite bad booking is you have to have sort of an internal logic as a wrestler, as a creative person, as an artist that you carry with you. And you've identified as the thread for all of the Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose, that character is this sort of internal Bushido that he has. He's got sort of this honor code, like a Wolverine, right? And that's what makes him likable. And that also, I think, dovetails perfectly with why this match ends the way it does. So, look, we're back on track.
Thank you, Joaquin.
Well done.
I mean, in This Is Awesome, you're the master of this part of the thing, so I'm glad you're able to help me in my Padawan ways. Anyway, the next big explosion in this match, I wanted to just get your take on it, was Kenny Omega going head first into the explosives. Like we talked earlier about these guys like just putting it all on the line. When you saw this guy going head first, what did you think?
So this is the one where Kenny gets shot into the ropes and then gets hit with the basement drop kick, right?
Yep.
And then goes back into it again.
Yep.
Okay, so number one, I was very surprised. Number two, when he hit the ropes again, they still exploded. I was like, that's great. I didn't know you could do that.
You thought it was just one and done. Said it and that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway.
Well, it's also that is a storytelling moment in the match. Like we talk about how they take the time in each part of the match to sort of like lay the groundwork and establish the rules. Like, early on we get like the headlock stuff and it's like, okay, like these guys need to rethink how they're going to wrestle because they can't use the ropes. Now we've established just because you hit a rope once does not mean it's diffused. The tension does not go away. And I think it's important to show that like these things can go off multiple times. So like it's always there.
And once they've gone off once and then twice, things just really ramp up in this match. They have like this really high angle suplex into the barbed wire boards that looked like it dropped Omega on his neck pretty much. Mox is like wrapping barbed wire around his arm so he can deliver extra punishment when he, hits clotheslines and grinding it in his face. And then Kenny, of course, in an act of desperation, pushes Moxley into the barbed wire fence. He goes face first so he can push Moxley into that. And that's like an act of self-sacrifice because he knows that to win this match, he's going to have to put himself through his own level of pain that, hopefully he can overcome. And eventually they do make it outside to the landmines, which is the next ratcheting up of tension in the match. And of course, the commentators, they play up the real danger of this. They're really teasing it on the aprons. And then Mox goes for a kill shot, hitting a paradigm shift into the barbed wire board, putting Kenny Omega face first into it, but also impaling himself on it. And then, of course, there's the explosion. Frank, I heard a bit of a groan. Is this what you were alluding to before?
No. This is not what I would consider the worst moment of the match. However, this is the part where the pyrotechnics crew clearly started to unravel. Because this is the one where the sparklers go off on one side.
Yeah.
However, still a good noise, and also Kenny Omega just like brain busters himself on that paradigm shift. Like it's like he's getting a brain buster off the apron. Like Kenny looks like he gets killed by this, and that makes it work, despite the fact that the pyrotechnics were a little lackluster on this one.
Well, I think that's the way that he takes that move, Frank, and I think that sell is supposed to be a callback to the double or nothing through the glass table spot, correct?
Yep.
Like he kind of takes it in a very similar way.
Oh, Was it Double or Nothing? That was the first Dynamite, right?
Yeah, first Dynamite. Yep.
Oh, first
Dynamite.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It's more of a sell for like a Death Rider than it is for a Paradigm Shift, right? The way he elevates coming off the apron.
Yeah.
I think it's visually very effective. And it also shows, like, again, like we've been saying before, like Moxley is willing to hurt himself to inflict pain on Kenny Omega. Like he's just like, well, what can I do? What afflicts the maximum amount of damage? It's Paradigm Shift, but it turns out I'm going to land in a bunch of barbed wire. Fuck it, do it anyway. It's a nice moment.
He does, by the way, he yells Death Rider before he does it. Did you catch that?
Oh, okay, there you go.
So
awesome.
he signals it, and I think that's something that I'm hearing from everybody as we talk about this is the reason, maybe at times the explosions are a little chintzy, and kind of looking back, maybe I was a little more impressed at the time, and maybe memory does a certain thing to it. I think that certainly the FMW explosions are a little more impressive back in the day, and maybe that's partially because they were darker, smoke-filled rooms, and there's something
also,
about that. It's very
generation
overlit.
VHS copies, Joaquin.
Well, there's that too.
The LP.
There's also the fact that they're
the
actually
LP.
dangerous. Like
Sure.
Khan pointed this out in the post show before he kind of like owned up to the fact that like the final ring spoiler alert, the final ring explosion doesn't go off. He was just like, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to fucking blow these guys up, basically? And it's like, we're not gonna do that. And like, I can buy that for this bit because I'm like, how do you safely detonate explosions under those boards? You have to just have them off on the side. You can't put it all the way around it.
Hey, now, hang on, Frank. Are you saying that Florida in 2021 is more dysregulated than Japan in 1989? Because I don't know if that's true.
Florida,
I think it's government
where wrestling
regulation
was an
that's keeping
essential
me
worker.
safe.
Wrestling was made an essential business in Florida so they could continue to run shows during the worst pandemic in history.
Frank,
It
was essential for me.
It
needed
was
the
for
wrestling.
You know what?
Needed.
I'm glad those guys had the shows because it helped get me through it. But like, this shit is dangerous. I don't think any of you guys watched the most recent 62-year-old Onita fighting fresh out of retirement Matt Tremont from H2O
Missed
Wrestling.
that one.
You guys didn't watch
Missed that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Matt Tremont
like
was in
piranhas
the
or something, Frank? Like, what's the weird thing in that match?
No.
Like,
so the exploding ring is really impressive. They use a lot of fire in the match too. Very like the fireworks and stuff, the exploding ring, all that. That's all fine. The way they use fire is just Onita and Matt Tremont just being irresponsible with it. Matt Tremont was in hospital for 10 days afterwards in a burn ward.
oh God.
Yeah. Like, and that's what happens if you do it for real. Like, like Jon Moxley had to like show up on Dynamite 4 days later. Like, this explosion wasn't that impressive, but what are you going to do? You got to blow them up for real? No.
No.
But I
And
digress.
if nothing else, they are landing in just a tanglement of barbed wire, and Moxley is like right in their tangle with it. There's a great shot of them as they're on the apron, and they've got a great replay shot of them going off. And JR has a great line. They both went to hell, but I'm not sure who made it back yet.
Yeah. JR's great during this one.
Yeah,
He's worse. Like he's barely holding it together, but
Him and
he does have
Callis
some
cannot talk in this match. Like, both him and Callis are losing their voices, just screaming.
Moving into like the ending stretch of this match, you've got Moxley, who after that paradigm shift, he moves into kill mode, and he's just trying to do away with Omega with one big shot, just putting in big move after big move. Both men really unsteady. Omega goes for V-trigger into one-winged angel. And then this is my favorite moment of the match, to be honest.
Yes.
After the one-winged angel is hit, Jon Moxley sets off the explosion, hits the ropes to set off an explosion and break the pin, kick out of the one-winged angel. I've watched a lot of wrestling. Is this the greatest kick out in wrestling history?
Well, it's not technically a kick out because no one's kicked out of the one-winged angel except someone has, and it was Kota Ibushi like 10 years ago. But this is the closest that you can get to actually a kick out of a one-winged angel. I thought it was fucking brilliant. I actually forgot about it, and when it happened, I just like popped. I was like, yeah. Like,
it just shows you that how much these guys have a command of their character and how they understand who they are as characters, in the ring and out of the ring. Like, this is just a perfect distillation of Mox's resourcefulness. He will do anything to not lose this match. including, blowing himself up.
Yeah, just the grit, the heart. That's what you want in your lead face. Like, that is, as you said, it's a perfect distillation of his character, what happens here. And I was just like jumping out of my chair at this point the first time I watched it. Joaquin, what did you think of this part?
Actually, the same thing, Frank. It's not that I forgot. It's just when I saw it again, I was the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. I was just pointing at the screen because it was so good. Again, AEW is just so smart. Like, to go back a few steps, because we've been tracking this over the course of our conversation. Again, the first sort of explosion happens because Kenny is cheating, right? The second explosion happens because Kenny is basically like taking too much time and taunting Moxley while he's trying to apply a figure four. We breezed by that part. Each of these moments, it shows you something about the character. It's not just moves with a Z. It's not just a garbage wrestling, even though there is literally garbage cans around. It's storytelling. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And after that, just in like an incredible image, you've got Mox pushing himself to his feet with the barbed wire bat. And at that point, it's clear Omega can't put this man down himself, short of killing him for good. And that's when the Good Brothers run out. Moxley, of course, tries to take them on because it's Jon Moxley. Of course, he's going to try and fight them. But they have enough time to give Omega an exploding barbed wire bat, which Moxley takes to the face for a 2 count, and then Moxley, of course, ends up taking a one-winged angel through a setup chair to get the 3. What did you guys think of this little ending stretch here?
What a spot!
This is the worst part. So,
whoa, Frank, what?
First off, this is the worst part of the match. The finish is the worst part of the match. Worse than the ring explosion. Yep, the finish is the worst part of the match because, so the Good Brothers run in. Exploding bat's awesome because usually they have a power cable on them. In Japan, they always have like a little sparkler cable.
This guy's an aficionado of
look. I'm a writer. I spend a lot of time unemployed. So I'm just like, okay, cool. That's that's a really cool bit. And then I expected, Mox to like actually fight the Good Brothers off, or for it to just be more than like 2 guys run down, turn it into a 3-on-1 match, and then the match just fucking ends. Like, it's a really lackluster finish especially for a pay-per-view main event. That's a TV finish. That's a WWE. That's a Monday Night Raw finish.
Yeah,
except for the exploding bat. Go. You guys go.
We're raising our hands here. Chuck, first. You want to go?
No, go ahead, Joaquin. Please.
You want a taste?
Listen, this is the story of the match. And this is going to dovetail into our conversation about the end. Jon Moxley is a lone wolf, and so far being a lone wolf has been all right for him, and this shows why he loses this match. He loses the match because he doesn't have that backup. Everybody else in AEW has 3 to 4 to 5 to 8 friends.
I would argue, Joaquin, the main thesis point, the entire existence for AEW and all of their stories is gotta have friends, man.
Gotta have friends.
All stories. All of them.
Darby!
He's got a friend!
It's
a weird old guy named Steve.
Yeah. But Darby was Mox's friend. Friends. Where's Darby?
He's got an older friend named Steve with a weird soul patch.
He's in like a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah, they were in the warehouse.
It's not there.
But they drive away, I assume, to the arena to watch the rest of the matches and take in some catering.
They didn't get there in time. That was just before this. They didn't get there in time.
Yeah.
There's a supercut of like him turning up 15 minutes later and going, "What's happened here?"
if they cut from the Good Brothers coming down to the ring to Darby Allin stuck in traffic, then I would give this match 20 stars.
It's amazing.
But yeah, like I
cut you off, Mox
is meant to have friends. You're right. Mox is meant to have friends. So there's like some like where's Lee Johnson?
He's not friends with Lee Johnson.
Lee Johnson's friends with lots of people.
From Adam. He doesn't know that guy. No, this work. I mean, look, it's disappointing and it's a little deflating, but I think it's supposed to. And I think it's kind of like with the Jericho going over Kenny Omega back at Double or Nothing. That was a little deflating, but they knew they had the ace up their sleeve of Jon Moxley to show up to pop the crowd again. I think that they thought they could get away with having kind of a bummer, disappointing, lackluster ending if that's how you want to see it.
Because the ring was going to explode.
Because the ring was going to explode, and because something really amazing was going to happen, and we were all going to cry. That was the way it was supposed to work. Just didn't.
Because it still makes sense with one of the best moments in wrestling ever.
Right.
Because look, if that ring actually exploded, it would have been one of the best moments in wrestling ever.
Correct.
But we didn't get that.
But it's also like, God, I keep going to say this because I criticize the other company. The other company gets criticized for this because they do it too much. But Frank, this is heat. It's heat, brother.
The Good Brothers are just gone, though.
It's heat for
They're
Kenny.
Just gone. They're just not around anymore.
They went back to their home planet.
Yeah.
Impact Wrestling.
Yeah.
For me, the defense of this ending, because I love the ending, is that, as we've said, Moxley is a lone wolf, and Omega can't put him down himself. And it just really emphasizes how much of a tough bastard Jon Moxley is. You know, he takes that exploding bat to the face. It takes a one-winged angel into a set-up chair, which looks like it absolutely killed, to finally put him down.
Oh, yeah, that looks great. I won't debate that. That looks incredible. They do it perfectly.
I thought
I'm sure it felt like shit.
I thought this was a satisfying ending to this feud that these two have had, where Omega had to go to such lengths to finally put down Jon Moxley in a way that he couldn't previously. Like, he couldn't get it done at Full Gear back in 2019. To do it, he had to have a little bit of cheating in the first match, and then, of course, with this one, he had to have the Good Brothers come in, and Moxley didn't come out of it looking any worse for wear. He looked like a complete badass in all the best ways possible, and Omega looked resourceful, and he looked like he was someone that really was taking his position as champion as something that he valued so highly that he was willing to sacrifice not only his own body, but his honor and every fiber of integrity that he had to get this championship.
It puts both guys over. Absolutely.
Yeah, both guys. Here's the thing. Despite the fact that the Good Brothers just kind of come out there and just end the match, both guys do come out of this looking better, except for what happens after the match.
Yeah.
Bell to bell.
We'll get into that.
Frank, would the ending have been more satisfying if Anderson had done Sour Boy?
Yes.
Would have improved it a little bit.
The ring doesn't explode. He's like, we got a problem here.
Yeah, exactly.
SpaghettiOs, the wing didn't explode.
Let's get it. Obviously, everyone who's listening to this podcast know what happens. Omega and the Good Brothers keep beating him down. Omega throws a trash can at Bryce Remsburg. I forgot that. And that felt transgressive as well. They handcuff Jon Moxley. A countdown timer appears on the screen. They keep beating him down. They get out of there. Moxley is handcuffed in the middle by himself, and at the last minute, Eddie Kingston runs out, tries to wake up Moxley with no time left to spare, chooses to protect Jon Moxley, but of course, the explosion that happened was not the explosion we were promised. There's some things go off in the side, some things go off on the ring post, but in the center of the ring, these two are sort of left pretty unharmed and unaffected by it. Obviously, we've talked about how that affects we'll talk about how that affects the legacy. But what do you think was meant to happen? In my mind, the ring was meant to collapse or something, because, as you said, they couldn't blow them up. Like, they're not going to actually blow them up for good. But I'm trying to think of what was going to happen to give the idea of them being blown up.
I think there's just going to be like a lot of explosions on the outside.
Like, a lot more smoke for sure.
Yeah. So Anita's smart with his exploding barbed wire death matches is he does them outside. Like, I understand Daly's place is partially covered, but you can't set fireworks off going straight into the sky, which is actually like one of the defining features of like the Anita style exploding death match. The setup for this Daly's place is they still have the wrestlers as the immediate audience surrounding the ring, and they pulled them back further for the exploding match, so it's a little safer. But there's still people who are too close for you to set off the amount of explosions that you probably need to make this look cool. And that's a problem. Reportedly, they did a dry run where they saw what the ring explosion was going to look like the day before, and apparently looked great. So maybe it was just like a bunch of fireworks didn't fire. They set them up wrong.
Some kind of misfire. Yeah.
But I like your idea for the ring collapse. That's kind of what I like. Honestly, if they had also if all the fireworks went off concurrently, they all went off like in sequence almost, like each like the sparklers fire and then like the smoke fires and stuff like that. If they set them all off at once, and this I have been thinking about this a lot since the day this match happened. If you set off Kane's pyro, like the ring post pyro, you set that off on the four corners, and then you do like the Big Show ring collapse, where you like pull it and the ring falls down, then you've got a very impressive finish still in what would likely be a much safer way. Also, just set off like some smoke bombs in the middle of the ring.
You needed more smoke. It needed to cover Kingston and Moxley so that you didn't just see that they were just kind of laying there. They just needed more visual cover for them.
Yeah, you could even play an explosion through the speakers, like a noise.
Right.
Like, there's so many things they could have done that they didn't do. But AEW, they're gonna do it again. Like, they didn't get what they wanted out of this the first time. So I feel like the second that they run like a show at like the Jag Stadium or something like that, they're gonna blow that fucking ring up.
I think you're absolutely right. I got a question for you guys, because I got to be perfectly honest. I watched this whole match again, but I got to go over what happened with the explosion from memory, because I just can't watch it.
It's so embarrassing.
I feel mostly it's Eddie. Eddie commits so hard to this, and it's like not even arguably, it's the biggest moment of his career. Coming out in the main event at the last one of his pay-per-view, and it doesn't work.
But he gets but later he gets more big moments in his career. To date, this was the thing that was going to set him on the path, and it still did.
Right.
Like for all intents and purposes, it didn't derail anything for Eddie Kingston. But yeah, it should have been a career-defining moment.
I can't do it I can't watch it. I'm like, I don't think I'll ever watch it again.
I have and did for this. It's a bummer. It's such a bummer. But if you ever want to have some fun, though, watch the promo they cut about it, about how shitty the explosion was, and how it was like a shitty Don Callis Canadian construction company who did it, because it was Kenny's plans, and them just goofing about it, and Eddie Kingston still selling that he's afraid of pyro. like how long ago was this? Like 10 months ago? This is January. He's been selling it for 10 months on every show he's on that has pyro on commentary. Like, he made it work, so it's okay. It's okay to cry.
Fine. All right.
We can cry in wrestling.
We've talked around it a little bit. I guess the question I've got, and I'll ask Joaquin, because Joaquin, you've been quiet to this point talking about the ending. I guess the one question that has to be answered talking about this match is, how much does the ending not working affect the broader match itself?
Okay, so guys, I think it was Nietzsche.
Oh no.
Oh,
that's right.
God. I didn't have
That's right.
a podcast for this. Jeez.
It said, the end of a melody is not its goal, but nonetheless, had the melody not reached its end, it would not have reached its goal either. A parable. Listen, like, at the end of the day, I think that people were very excited to have a field day with this. It's if anything, this is one of the reasons that I wanted us to pick this match when you gave us all the selections. It's this match and this ending encapsulates so much about what makes AEW great, and it also encapsulates the things that, maybe are the foibles of AEW. They take big swings, and sometimes you fail on a big swing. And after that, they pivot, just like Frank had just mentioned. Like, to me, the ending of this match does not ruin everything that came before, because I still remember a match that is one of, like, the most exciting, best matches within the confines of this obstruction that is this gimmick. And there were still a lot of inventive spots. There were a lot of great little gimmicks. I mean, I could talk forever about the exploding bat. And this is still a big moment for those guys. Like, it doesn't take away every moment before this. And again, we were talking about the story of the match. We got the thesis of it. We got what it was building to. And maybe it didn't get executed the way we wanted, but at the same time, move forward a few weeks, they were still telling the story that they wanted to tell. Eddie Kingston's fine. He just wrestled CM Punk at a pay-per-view.
Got cheered. and got CM Punk booed and had the match of his fucking life. Like, Eddie Kingston was fine.
Yeah, this match is a great match in my memory. There's a moment after that's not a great moment in my memory, but I choose not to focus on that. I mean, this is also just very indicative of what's wrong with sort of wrestling discourse or the discourse within fandom, but that's a whole other podcast. Like, it does not ruin it for me because the journey was still there. And at the end of the day, did we get to where we wanted to go on this trip? Did we get home? Yeah, the car's a little banged up. We got into a fender bender on the way, but we're here. We're all in one piece. It was a good ride. We had a good playlist on. I like this match. I love this match.
And to speak to your point, when these two came out against the Young Bucks at Double or Nothing with full crowds returning, the crowd was chanting as much for Eddie Kingston as they were for Jon Moxley. Chanting as much for this folk hero that had sort of come up as they were like the guy who had been positioned as the number one star in the company. And that's because even though this didn't necessarily hit in the end the way they'd hoped it would, the effect still happened that they'd hoped it would.
100%. This is not the Shockmaster. And anybody who says that it is a fuddy-duddy and mean.
I guess that's my question. Do you guys think, I mean, obviously we're all still here. We're all still watching. Some of the discourse after the incident at the end of Revolution was essentially people were saying, like, I felt like I was lied to. I was sold this thing and I didn't get it. And there's these people on Twitter being like, well, now I'm never going to get an AEW pay-per-view again. They lied to me. And like, do you think that was just like in the moment take mongering, or do you think there were people who actually felt that way?
Yeah, if they did, they got replaced because their two biggest pay-per-views were the two after this one. So
that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. I don't know, like Joaquin, like your boy Nietzsche. He might have been one of these people. There's a Nietzsche quote I'm looking at here. I'm not upset. I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you. See, that's. Okay. I'm sure there are people out there who maybe felt like they were sold a false bill of goods. I don't feel that way. I'm just asking questions here, guys. Just asking questions.
Okay. We're part of the wrestling internet community, for better or worse. There are people who are going to be negative about everything. They'll find the worst part of anything. But if you're looking for payoffs to things that happen in professional wrestling, where do you look other than AEW right now? Because even New Japan's having a lot of trouble paying off their big angles and making people happy. Like, they did the thing where they put the belt on Naito. That's like the last thing that they did that was like super satisfying to that fan base. AEW rewards you for watching all the time. WWE has a true disdain for people who want like this kind of like consistency and storytelling and a third act in wrestling. Like they hate it. Like, WWE just wants to do act 2 until they stop. Like, where did you go? Like, if this was like an unsatisfying payoff, like, how do you make good on that? I don't know. By having the characters act consistently and all people involved going on to bigger and better things afterwards. Yeah. Nothing was taken away from me other than a fireworks show. And you know what? If you want to go see a ring blow up, you can watch FMWE, where the gimmick of every match is literally that the ring explodes.
Right. I just hope people keep this in mind the next time, because it's going to happen. Eventually, AEW will under-deliver on something, and hopefully the world doesn't end and the internet doesn't explode when it happens, the way that it did back in February.
Yeah, I mean, AEW has taken a lot of knocks for stuff like the Nightmare Collective or the original Dark Order, and weird comedy sketches like on TV, and they took their knocks for not delivering on things that people wanted, but they always make it right. And as a wrestling fan, all we have is time, because literally we get to watch 52 weeks of this shit a year. So if they decide that they want to make good on it, they generally do. Nightmare Collective, they were just like, well, we got to put this one in the can. But they still did a few sketches online to kind of like wrap up the angle. So
I love those brand bits with her therapist. Those were excellent.
Yeah, that was great stuff. It's like, oh, fuck, this didn't work. Let's try and creatively like write our way out of it. And they did that with this. Again, go watch that Mox and Eddie promo from the Dynamite after this. I'm sure the original intention was for neither of those guys to be on TV for a sustained period of time. But They did great.
And you mentioned the Mox and Eddie promo. Also the Omega and Don, the 69 Me Don promo.
Oh, right. God, I forgot about that. Incredible promo.
Yeah, how could you be mad? Like, honestly, we kind of got more juice out of it than we would have if the ring actually exploded, except for Eddie Kingston, who would have had the biggest moment of his career. But
and also I would have cried real tears.
Isn't that going to be like the story of Eddie Kingston's career though? Like he goes for the biggest moment of his career and just misses by just a smidge.
They're gonna put that TNT title on him. Like that's what's gonna happen, or he's gonna win the belts.
I hope they put the AEW title on him.
Oh,
I don't know how.
I would cry real tears. He made it at 38.
Yeah.
Like he got his first deal at 38. Like it's fucking incredible. Like I want to see Eddie get all of his flowers. But as we've seen in AEW, it's like you have the time. We don't have to rush this. We can blow up the ring next year.
I am going to have to draw a bow on this at some point, guys. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you very much for popping on. Did you guys have anything else you'd like to say about this match before we jump out?
Commentary for me is a real standout here. I'll just really quickly. There's a little detail at the top of the match where they talk about how everyone that is near ringside has to wear flame retardant clothes. And I was like, that's one of those little details where clearly like Excalibur was like bored in his hotel and was like, what can I say to add to this match? And there we go.
There is a line very early on from commentary that at the time was true, but actually I think the opposite happened, which was like Excalibur said Onita's career was shortened because of matches like this. I think this actual match extended Onita's career because he saw a bad explosion, then saw that he could like roll around the world doing explosion matches again at the age of 62. So this match would have not. So the exploding barbed wire death match actually extended his career as opposed to shortened it.
Oh.
Joaquin, anything else to add before we head out?
Yeah, I love, and I've always loved that AEW wears this badge of being sort of the people that are going to prop up the history of professional wrestling, and whether that's sort of resurrecting this sort of niche genre gimmick match or just even, I mean, that Kingston angle, even though it didn't work out, I mean, that's a reference. That's a reference to Onita and Funk. They pay homage and they pay deference to the past in a way that is creating future wrestling geeks and dorks, and it's driving people to all these old tapes that you can find on Daily Motion now. And that's a great thing, because the reason I love AEW is they roll with the new. And they do that with a view towards the past as well, and that's why I can see this company being a sustainable option moving into the future.
Excellent. Well, look, as I said, thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. I love this match, and I'm really glad we got to talk about it. When I laid out this podcast, this was actually one of the matches I wanted to most talk about and discuss because of how controversial it was, but because of how many redeeming qualities that I think a lot of people have forgotten. So thank you for digging into it with me. You can find the guys from This Is Awesome on Twitter at TIA Pod. You can also search for their podcast, This Is Awesome. I would thoroughly suggest you listen to that podcast. As I said, I basically copied their format for this podcast here. So if you enjoyed this today, definitely give them a listen. They deep dive into matches from all around the wrestling world, and you guys have got some death matches in there. If if rewatching Moxley and Omega's made you want to look at some death matches, I'm sure you'll be able to find some in their podcast archive as well. And if you have enjoyed today,
holiday season, watch the Christmas death match from Big Japan.
There you go.
It has a cake. A cake of,
it does have a cake.
Yeah, it does have a cake.
That's the Merry Christmas for Death Match, I believe, Frank. Is that right?
Merry Christmas for Death Match. That's the one.
Love it.
If you have enjoyed the show today, I would really appreciate it if you could rate and review it on your podcast app of choice, on iTunes or on wherever you get your podcasts. And why not tell a friend? Why not tell someone else that loves wrestling to come and listen to the AEW Match Guide podcast? But thank you so much for being on here today, Frank, Joaquin, and Chuck. I really appreciate having you. And thank you for listening to us. See you next time.
for listening to the AEW Match Guide podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then you can subscribe on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Sir_Samuel. I'd love to hear from you. The AEW Match Guide podcast is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where you can find many other fantastic podcasts discussing not just AEW, but all parts of the world of professional wrestling. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Sam Brown.